Rabbi Nathan.
Shakoach. Thank you, Rabbi Rich, Connie, and Dave. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Yeah. Well, it's that time. It's Pesach season. Just a few weeks. Passover's coming up. And so we have 2 nights of Passover Seders in the Jewish community. The first night here at Ruach Israel, we like to give space for you to be at each other's homes or with family. So that'll be, we call it the home night Seder, your first Seder. That's on Wednesday, April 1st, that evening. That's when Passover begins. So host a Seder. I can help. Find a Seder to go to, talk with your friends, come over our house, whatever, and find somewhere to do Pesach the first night. And then second night Seder, we're going to be doing here in the fellowship hall. And I believe that's at 5:30. Is that right? 5:30. And that is a catered meal. Harry and Barbara and the team Josh are putting together the Seder meal and organizing that, and it's going to be lovely. So sign up and register for the second night Seder on Thursday. It's a joyful time. Rain is also going to be leading a children's Seder, I believe, downstairs for the kids, and so they'll be kind of coming up and going down and being a part. And then we're doing something really special at the end of Passover as we celebrate and remember the splitting of the sea, which is a part of the end of Passover on the 7th day. That's kind of the theme of redemption. We're going to be doing something called the Meal of Messiah, where we remember Yeshua's resurrection. And so it's a totally different Seder, but still with cups. And so we'll make some more announcements about that later on, but see if you can plan to come for the 7th night Seder. That's going to be Thursday, April, 8th? Is it the 8th? 9th? Wednesday. I should have put it in my notes. Wednesday, April 8th. That's right. On the 7th day of Passover at 5 o'clock. Okay, just by way of some announcements as we're getting ready to start thinking about Passover. Next Shabbat after Oneg, I'd like to sit with anyone who would like to, and we can learn some of the melodies for Hallel. So we can all sing together, because that makes the Seder really special, is when we all know the songs and we can sing together. So come if you'd like to do that. Every year, this Shabbat, a couple right before Passover, I like to talk about the whys of Passover and the how-tos of Passover to help us enter into this season so it doesn't just blur by and we can enter more deeply. So let's do some of the nuts and bolts of Passover today. The Seder is all about why, the why of Passover. So, of course, we begin with the questions that the children ask. Let's sing the first question just so we can get in the spirit and start thinking about it. Ready? Ma nishtana hailai lachaze mikol halelot mikol halelot hailai lachaze mikol halelot hailai lachaze mikol halelot. Now do you feel ready for Passover? So why is this night different from all other nights? Of course, this is the night, as we read in our readings today, when the Lord brought us out of bondage in Egypt with his mighty hand. And so every year, we Jews, we gather around the world to remember Pesach, to remember the Exodus, the birth of our people, the spiritual birth of our people. Now, instructions for Passover span across the entire Torah. Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and it's really important. It's emphasized, it's reiterated. And I want to share 3 words that come from these passages: keep, observe, and remember. So keep comes from Exodus 12. Keep the Passover festival, the feast to the Lord. Observe is in Exodus. Observe the feast of Matzot, for on this day I have brought your ranks out of the land of Egypt. And remember this day on which you came out of Egypt, on the house of bondage. So our tradition has these ideas that we keep this, we observe it, and we remember. Passover is central to our covenantal relationship with God across the entire Bible. So, even many non-religious Jews will gather for a Seder, it has kept the Jewish people together for centuries and centuries and centuries, 3,000 years. So let's lean into this a bit. Why is Passover so important? And I want to draw this from the Torah. So the first point is that Passover is to be a sign. The Torah says that Passover is to be a sign. I love this verse from Exodus 13. Passover will be a sign on your hand and a reminder between your eyes. So this is a reference to tefillin. His words will be a sign between our eyes and on our hand. But here it's Pesach. The Passover will be a sign right here, so that the Torah of the Lord may be in your mouth. What do you think of that? The Torah of the Lord may be in your mouth. Maybe that's why we remember the Passover by eating. At the Seder, we don't just tell the story, we eat the story. Really, we do. So Passover is a sign. It's a sign that reminds us of who we are and whose we are, who we belong to. It's a sign to remember the power that the Lord has and how he's delivered us with his strong hand. It's a sign that points us back to the Torah that he gave us at Mount Sinai. It's a sign of God's love and covenant with Israel. It's a sign that we're members of that covenant. And through Yeshua, who we will find out at the Seder is the heart of the Passover experience, it's a sign of his love even for the nations of the world, who he's also brought alongside of himself. In the Haggadah, we don't just tell the story of ancient Jews in the past. We tell the story as if we were with them. That's the whole idea. We're like, we came out of Egypt. We passed through the sea. We stood at Sinai. We relived the story. And so Passover links us. It links us together across families and communities and generations and continents, even with the land of Israel as one people inside of God's larger story. And that sign doesn't stop with us. So just imagine, I love this idea of like us as individual Jewish people. We gather around shared tables in families, and then those tables form Jewish communities, and then those communities come together as all Israel, making Passover a sign for God's covenant with Israel to the entire world. And if Jewish communities are a sign of Israel, and Israel is a sign to the world, then how much more, consider this as a Messianic Jewish community, must we immerse ourselves in the Passover experience? Because we're a sign. See, for us, Passover bears the sign of Yeshua, the resurrected Messiah. He embodies the Passover story and reveals himself as the heart of God's covenant with Israel, the mediator of its deeper hope. So Passover for us should be really important because we're a sign for Yeshua within Israel. And in doing so, we link the wider community of Yeshua from the nations, the church. We link the church back to Israel by doing so. So we have a really big reasons to stay with Passover and to enter into the Pesach this year. Second point of why we observe Passover. Passover forms an intergenerational people. So Passover is not just something we remember. Passover is something we do together. And so the commandments to keep and to observe and to remember, they're community instructions. So they're not something that we can just observe alone. I mean, you can't. I mean, you can have some matzah maybe on Passover and you can do what you can do, but you can't observe Passover alone. That's not the intention. Because it's a covenanted life with God that's not meant to be lived alone. It's meant to be lived in covenant with others, in covenant with God. So we're covenanted with each other in covenant with God. You got that theological picture? We have a covenant with each other that's part of our covenant with God. And so our community becomes a microcosm of this. So here at Ruach Israel, this is the way it is. We covenant with each other and live a life together as best we can that's in covenant with God's work in the world and in covenant with us. So God builds his people by giving us a way of life. He builds his people by giving us shared practices and rhythms and tasks. And it's not about works or faith, or that's not what it's about. That's just a misunderstanding of what Jewish life is about. Jewish life is is about how God wants us to come together around his tasks, his mitzvot, his life, so that our community is built around him and not built around the rest of the world. So, the best way to build a community is to gather around something meaningful together. And that's what Passover is. We clean our homes. We prepare for the Seder. We eat matzah together. These aren't just rituals. They're shared acts of faith. We step out in faith by doing this. If you don't have faith, you don't eat matzah on Passover because it doesn't matter. But eating matzah on Passover is saying, I have faith that God is working in history and that I'm a part of that story. So these tasks, they bind us together, and the tasks matter, but the relationships that are formed through them matter even more. And this is how we live out our shared covenantal life with God together. Now, so we might say, like I could go on vacation and I can make memories with my family and I can do these things. And that's good. I love vacations and memories. But think of Pesach differently. It's not only about making memories. It is about making memories, but it's about forming an identity. It's about making memories within a covenanted family, within a covenanted community, within a people, within this covenant with God. So it's about memories within God's story. That's the idea. So that's how we pass on an intergeneral faith, identity. The Haggadah itself is built around this verse in Exodus 3:8. You are to tell your son on that day, saying, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. That's the whole Haggadah is like built around this verse. And for 3,000 plus years, the Jewish people have been doing exactly that. We've been called to something bigger, a covenant that continues, l'dor v'dor, from generation to generation to generation. And notice that God commands this in the Torah before the Exodus actually happens. So it's not like, we go through this thing and then we look back and say, hey, let's remember that. That'd be really great. Let's do that. It's really interesting. He says, listen, I'm going to redeem you. This is what's going to happen. And then you're going to tell this story to your children and your children to their children and their children to their children. And you're going to eat the Pesach. You're going to clean out chametz. You're going to eat matzah for 7 days, every single generation before we even left Egypt. Is that interesting? So God had you here. He had us in mind. I mean, I think us here at Ruach Israel sitting here today in mind before he delivered ancient Israel from Egypt. And he's thinking about their great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren, all the way up to us today. This is an intergenerational calling that we're a part of. And there's likely many more generations to come. So if one, and I don't mean this to be heavy-handed at all. I'm trying to give the invitation. But if one Jewish family decides, enough with Passover this year, I'm just going to do something else. I'm busy. I've scheduled other things. There's a gap. There's like an intergenerational gap, a generational gap. Does that make sense? It's a gap. There's a missing link in the chain. And how much more so for us Jewish followers of Yeshua. We're called to be salt within our Jewish people. We're called to be the link, within our intergenerational community. So we must pass the Passover on to our children. It's part of our mission for the Lord. And studies show, for families that kind of give up in the Jewish community and their grandchildren won't really know they're Jewish anymore without the Lord intervening in some way, which he does, as we see here in our community, in my own family. But naturally, that's the way that these things go. And that's sad. So, again, it's not passed on through one conversation. We don't just have a Seder and then we've passed it on. It's passed on through a life. So it's passed on through when our kids are starving at the Seder and they're like, this is taking way too long. And when are we going to eat? And they start to complain and you tell them why. That's part of the passing on of the Passover experience. So we don't want to rush through this. And I just want to say, in sort of the contemporary Jewish community, there's sort of like a trend to make Jewish holidays so kid-oriented that they're only kid-oriented. It's and then what happens is when they get older, they're like, it's just for my kids, it's not for me anymore. And I think that misses the whole point. I think the kids are supposed to be brought into the experience. I mean, obviously we want to make it kid friendly, but like they should be brought into this intergenerational experience that helps them look to something larger than themselves, not just another like bouncy house day or something like that. A little soapbox there. Anyway, I think kids can enter into it and be part of the story, and it's okay if they're a little uncomfortable for a little bit. Like that's part of our stories. I mean, we suffer and then we eat, and we suffer and then we eat. Like that's like giving them the life of the people of Israel. Okay, that might have been too far. I don't know. So we clean out our chametz together. Like that's kind of a pain, but it still is. It's kind of fun. We do this together. When you eat matzah sandwiches and you have to stand out from the crowd because you're different, like that's hard sometimes, but it's good. These small repeated acts become a framework, they become a life, and then they shape an intergenerational community, and they tell an intergenerational story, and they form an intergenerational people. So remember this. This is really important. I'm saying all these things about observing Passover, but we don't observe Passover in order to observe, like in order to earn God's love. And I think that's really important. We're not doing this to earn God's favor. It's instead we observe Pesach because we're already loved. You see the difference? It's really important. Because we're in a relationship with God as a community, God gives us a communal way of life, like we said. God redeemed Israel before giving us the Torah on Mount Sinai. I've rescued you. Now this is how you shall live. I've loved you. Now here's how you live. It's a blessing that he's giving us. It's treasure that he's giving us. And a kind of a theological way to put it is that he's not telling us to observe commandments to enter the covenant. We don't enter the covenant or the kingdom of heaven by observing commandments. The Torah says, now that you're in my covenant, this is how you shall live. It's a covenanted way of life. Okay. Passover is a part of that life, a life that he's given us as his treasured people to live out treasures and to be together. It sets us apart. It brings us joy. It serves as a sign for God's covenant in the world. Now, we're going to see this in our Seder. I mentioned it already in the Besorah, that Yeshua's last meal with his disciples is a Pesach Seder. And this is, of course, isn't by accident. At the table, he takes the elements of the Passover and he applies them to himself, like the blood of the lamb. It becomes our redemption. Like the matzah, Yeshua becomes our deliverance. And at the heart of Israel, he lives Israel's story. He actually lives the Passover story. We see this in Matthew. And so for us, we can see Pesach carrying this deeper layer of God's redemptive plan for the world. And we sit at the Seder, we're not only remembering the exodus of our people, but we're also participating in the life and redeeming work of our Messiah, that the Passover is an archetype or a plan that sort of shapes God's salvific plan for the world. So it's beautiful. Okay, Passover is an eternal, this is point 3, an eternal ordinance. It's eternal. In Exodus 12, we read, and you are to observe this day throughout your generations as an eternal ordinance. And in our tradition, that's even in the kingdom of heaven. We'll still be remembering Passover. And so I really like this. I like that it's eternal because it means I'm a part of something so much bigger than myself. If I'm honest, and I don't know if you guys feel this way, but like cleaning out the kitchen for Passover and the house kind of sometimes feels overwhelming. I don't know. Does that feel overwhelming to you sometimes? Maybe it's just us because we have so much mess in our house. I don't know. I mean, with eight children, and myself, we have so many crumbs everywhere, and we can't clean out too early because then we just get more crumbs again, So it's so funny. We have a whole cleaning schedule starting. I think it's next week that Rain has put together, like starting at the top of the house all the way down to the cars. Okay, but the point is that, I wonder sometimes, and maybe you felt this way, like, does it really matter if I didn't get this cabinet, or like, oh, there's this thing, I didn't get it right, or something like that. Does it really matter? The goldfish under the car seats. I love that question because it's like this thing that we wrestle. It's like holy to wrestle with it. Do you know what I mean? It's holy to wrestle, to wrestle with it. And our tradition speaks into it. It says, yeah, it matters, but when you're done cleaning, what we do is we hide 10 pieces of chametz, and then we search for them by candlelight, and then we burn them, and then we pray, hey, if there's any chametz I missed, I nullify it, it's not mine. And I love that. I love it. Because it takes this tension, it holds this tension together, where it's not just like, oh, it doesn't really matter. It matters, but we recognize that we're just giving it our best, and no one's going to observe Passover fully. No one can. It's impossible. And maybe then it'd be problematic because it was so perfect or something like that. I don't know. So, we do our best, and then we trust God to make up the difference. And he creates this space of grace in our lives, and I think it's very beautiful. So this prayer to nullify chametz reminds us that no one keeps Passover perfectly. And I think this is so important. We observe Passover from a full love tank as a response to God's love and not out of fear of making a mistake. So I want to throw that out there. He already loves you. He's already working in your life. And that's where this commandment to make this an eternal ordinance helps me, because it's not just about me. The Jewish people will keep Passover forever, and I get to be part of that. I'm a part of that forever. So, I'm not supposed to, I can't really opt out of it, but I'm also not the only part. So like Harry, you're observing Pesach for me in some way, and I'm observing Pesach for you, and Josh, and all of you guys, Bob, like Lisa, you guys are, we observe Pesach for each other. Does that make sense? So if one of us, can't do it as much or whatever, well, that's okay. We've got each other. We're doing this as a community. And I love that because it's eternal. It's bigger. It's bigger than us. So again, what matters is not that I get every detail, but that I'm participating, that my desire is to pass on the story of God's redemption. So make a mistake. Maybe make a mistake on purpose. I don't know. Let it remind you of your need for God's grace and your need for each other. Okay, so these are some reasons why we observe Passover, and let's touch on a few of the kind of how to observe Passover here, and hope this doesn't get too technical. The first thing is we clean out our chametz. So this verse in Exodus 12:15 says, "For 7 days you are to eat matzot, but on the first day you must remove all of the chametz from your houses. For whoever eats chametz from the first day until the seventh day, that soul will be cut off from Israel." That's a really strong commandment. That soul will be cut off from Israel. Hold that thought. I'm going to talk about it in a minute. And at its core, there are two simple instructions. Remove chametz and eat matzah. Remove chametz, eat matzah. So this leads to an obvious question. What is chametz? I mean, we have to answer the question. The Bible doesn't really say what chametz is. So what is chametz? So chametz literally means puffed up. And the way that this tradition was established in Second Temple, really early, established by Yeshua's day, is that chametz is five grains make chametz: wheat, barley, spelt, rye, and oats, when they come into contact with water. So yeast is not chametz. You can actually have yeast in your cabinets on Passover because the yeast isn't leavening any bread. Does that make sense? You can't put yeast with wheat and then add water because that would be chametz, or just the water and the wheat by itself. Does that make sense? Okay, that was always confusing to me for a long time, so that's why I wanted to share that. Okay, so it refers to grain that's risen. And traditionally, there's a tradition that developed in the Ashkenazic period in the diaspora to avoid something called kitniot, foods like corn, beans, rice. And the reason is that because they could be confused with the 5 grains. So that's why you'll see people removing things with corn syrup from their for Passover because of the corn that's connected to this corn grain. Does that make you see the connection there? Now, most recently, the conservative Jewish movement and the Messianic Jewish Rabbinical Council also followed suit that kitniot is not required on Passover. It's different in the Orthodox community. There's still, at least in the Ashkenazic community, Sephardic community is different. So we don't need to. And the reason the conservative movement went there is because we're not confusing corn with wheat anymore. It's just like a different world. So it's not relevant. However, if that's how you grew up and you want to do that, you can do that. That's okay. You can remove those things as well and continue that practice. Okay, we don't just avoid eating chametz, but we also remove it from our homes, because the Torah tells us that we're not to own any chametz. We don't own it. So now, to avoid throwing chametz out, what we do is there's a tradition of selling chametz before Passover and then buying it back afterwards. So you find someone who's not Jewish, or even there's other organizations that do this. You can actually sell your chametz. Our rabbinical council allows us to simply set it aside and designate an area that we're going to say like it's not ours, and we're not going to touch it over Pesach if going through a process of selling it is too difficult. It's just a lenience. So we get rid of our chametz, and then we clean. We clean our house. It's like spring cleaning. It's beautiful, actually. We remove all of our crumbs throughout the house. And there's something fun about it. I don't know, checking under the couch cushions and, the little HVAC ducts, and I find so much chametz in there. Oh, my goodness. And it's kind of fun. It's difficult, but it's fun. So this year, the way that it works is that chametz should be removed by Tuesday nightfall. So Passover starts Wednesday night at sundown. And then, so the tradition is to remove all the chametz from our house Tuesday night, and then what we do is we do the search for chametz on Tuesday night, and then the nullification prayer Tuesday night, and then on Wednesday morning is like the final time we make sure that all the chametz is out by about 10 in the morning, and there's a second nullification prayer we say as we're getting ready for Passover. So we go through this process just to help make sure that everything is gone. Okay, matzah, the second commandment is to eat matzah. So we remove chametz and we eat matzah. Matzah means to drained out bread. So in Exodus, we're told to prepare bread quickly without letting it rise. Now, matzah is made from the same grains that can become chametz. So wheat is not kosher for Passover unless it's kosher for Passover wheat. And, okay, what makes the difference? You can actually have grains, but they just can't be ground. What makes matzah is that it's wheat that is ground immediately and then baked in haste so that it doesn't have time to come into any contact with water in the air. We have a tradition that develops later that what does it mean to be baked in haste? It means 18 minutes, because 18 is in Jewish, letters is the number for chai, for life. So the idea is 18 minutes. You start a clock from grinding the flour to baking it in a 1,000-degree oven, and that's what makes matzah. So when you buy matzah flour, it's actually matzah ground back into flour again, and that's what makes it. That's why we can have matzah balls, which is a little counterintuitive because it's matzah going into water and maybe expanding. But again, we're like, it's going through this cool process, that we're doing the best we can to stay within the framework of what the Torah says, and yet still have yummy things. I think it's a beautiful way that the tradition develops. Although I'm not really into the big Passover cakes. You get a big fluffy chocolate cake, and it's how is that possibly Passover? And it's because it's made with potato starch and quinoa or something like that. Anyway. But they are okay. Okay, I'm totally off my notes. Okay, so we don't just remove chametz. We eat it, and it's eating matzah is considered a positive commandment. So you have not fulfilled the commandment of Passover until you eat matzah in our tradition. Now we eat matzah to remember the Lord's deliverance, and I think it's cool that, it's what God did is he's taking the Passover and bringing it into the heart of our homes. I mean, bread is like the heart of our homes. It's the kitchen. Those of you who work in kitchens, it's your heart of your house, right in the middle. And bread is the center of every meal. And he's saying you're going to get rid of your bread and you're going to replace it with something else. And what we eat affects everything. It reminds us of everything. It brings the whole household into the experience. It's not just the men go off or the women. It's everyone has to be part of this experience. It creates conversations. Why are we cleaning out our cabinets? Why are we selling our chametz? Why are we eating this? What are we doing? And that's the moment that we get to tell the story. That's maybe when the story is in our mouth. And very quickly, chametz is spiritualized. So we read in our readings today, about the chametz of the perishim, the corruption of the perishim, and in 1 Corinthians, Rav Shaul says, get rid of old chametz so that you may be new matzah.
For Messiah, our Pesach lamb has been sacrificed. Therefore, let us celebrate the Passover not with the old chametz of malice and wickedness, but with the matzah of sincerity and truth. And so chametz, puffed up, pride, sin, corruption, and matzah, sincerity and truth, became very, very much a part of the Jewish community. So when you're doing your Passover cleanings, it's appropriate to be thinking of this as a spiritual cleaning and cleansing as well of our homes and our soul. So we remove chametz from our homes. We ask God also to remove it from our hearts. And as we eat matzah, we remember the life of Yeshua, the true bread of life and the center of our Passover. Another way that we observe Passover is by taking off from work. So Passover lasts 7 days. The Torah tells us specifically that the first day and the seventh day are like a Shabbat. And so it says to gather for a holy assembly on these days. Stop from regular work, no business, no school, no normal routine of life, that kind of thing. And the main difference from these days and like a weekly Shabbat is actually a little stricter in that we are allowed to cook. The Torah gives this isn't just Jewish tradition, this is like in the Torah. It says you may cook to prepare your meal for Passover on Passover. So there's a lenience there. So this year, the days, if you can, the days to take off work are Thursday, April 2nd, beginning Wednesday night, and then Wednesday, April 8th, again, beginning the Tuesday night before, because the day begins in the evening. So if you can make space, if you can, talk to your boss, plan ahead, set the time, try to build life around these things if you can. And the heart, this is not about pressure or guilt or anything like that. I know there's life and whatnot, but it's just an invitation to create the space for our families and for our community and for God. And these can become lasting memories that if we miss them, we miss them. We don't carry those in with us if we're doing our normal things. So then we can kind of pass over the Passover, Okay, and lastly, I'll close with this point, is the Seder. The heart of the Passover is the Seder experience. In the Torah, we're actually commanded to have a Seder. It's not just to remember, but it says to gather and to eat and to tell a story to your children, and that's what a Seder is. Not just any meal, but the Passover lamb, the matzah, and the bitter herb. Those three are part of the Torah. Seder just means order. It's the order that we eat the Pesach lamb, the matzah, and the bitter herb. And it's the order that we've developed over centuries and centuries. It's a structured meal that takes us through the whole story of redemption. Of course, we don't have a temple, so we're not eating a Passover lamb, a sacrificed lamb. But we eat the matzah in replacement of the lamb, and we eat matzah with bitter herb in order to remember the lamb through these different symbols on the Seder plate. And again, the heart behind this whole Seder experience, is that God invites us to eat the story together so that his deliverance would never be forgotten. And again, for us, we'll have this beautiful seventh night Seder and Pesach. So if you can come for that, we're remembering the splitting of the sea and remember Yeshua's deliverance through his resurrection to the meal of Messiah. Now, there's weight to what I'm saying. There's weight to these passages in the Torah. And I want to just circle back to this challenging verse. The Torah says that the consequence for eating chametz on Passover is to be cut off from your people. I mean, it's like really hard. But I want to suggest that rather than seeing this as a punishment, I think we can understand it as a natural consequence. It's like stepping outside of God's story, removing your family from the community's covenantal life with God that we talked about in the beginning. So it's not about like you're bad or about shame or any of that stuff. It's just when a Jewish person says, I'm just not going to do this, I'm too busy, I've overscheduled other things, why bother, or whatever, or they've lost faith and they've given up. It's like stepping out of something that we're meant to share. We step out. We're not there. And our community feels that. We aren't whole because your place at the Seder table is empty. And so, again, none of us will do everything. We all miss things at times. And that's okay. And life comes up, and that's why we have each other, and we do it for each other. But I want to invite us, all of us, myself included, we think carefully about what we miss and what we don't, because your presence matters and your place at the table matters. Because you're a part of something much bigger than yourself, and you're contributing to others as well. So Passover, and this is true of all of God's life that he's called us to live, is not just about what I receive. It's about who we're becoming together. And so we all have a role to play in building a community around God. This is an invitation to step into life together around the treasures that God has given us. And it's, again, I just want to stress, it's not an all or nothing. Do what we can. So if this is new for you, if Pesach is new for you, or I think all of us can sort of like take where we are and then maybe grow a little bit. I love that. Don't feel you have to do everything, but start somewhere. And you can always use this phrase, there's always next year. I love that phrase. There's always next year. Remember, in the end, what matters most is the heart. Come together around what God has done, step into his story as a people, and pass his covenant down to our children. Enter into community life and just jump in where you can. So maybe that's come to a Seder. Maybe that's take one of the days off, clean one cabinet out. Maybe it's learn the Hallel Psalms. Maybe it's enter more deeply into the life of Yeshua this Passover. Stay focused on the heart. Passover's fueled by the joy of redemption and by what God has done in our lives. Chag Sameach, everyone, and may we have a joy-filled Passover. Shabbat Shalom.
And may your descendants and the descendants of your people Israel be those who know your name and study your Torah. For Messiah's sake, for Messiah's sake.